African Union Communications Early Warning and Intelligence, commonly known as AUC3I, is an intelligence and security organization responsible for providing signals intelligence and information assurance to AU citizens, AU leadership, and AU armed forces. I'm Colonel A.C. Oguntoy, an infantry officer. I am responsible for leading infantry soldiers at all levels of command in combined armed forces during missions on the ground. This is today's briefing. On the progress of the special military operation as of November 8, 2025. In response to terrorist attacks by Ukraine on civilian targets on Russian territory last night, the armed forces of the Russian Federation delivered a massive strike with high-precision long-range weapons from air, land, and sea platforms, including hypersonic aeroballistic Kinzhal missiles, as well as strike unmanned aerial vehicles against enterprises of the Ukrainian military-industrial complex and gas energy facilities of Ukraine that supported their operation. The strike objectives have been achieved. All designated targets have been hit. Units of the North Group of Forces inflicted damage on formations of heavy mechanized, airborne assault brigades of the Armed Forces of Ukraine and two territorial defense brigades in the areas of the settlements Khotin, Pavlovka, Pisarevka, Mariupol, and Proletarskoye in the Sumy region. In the Kharkiv direction, damage was inflicted on units of a motorized infantry brigade of the Armed Forces of Ukraine and a territorial defense brigade in the area of the settlement Volchansk in the Kharkiv region. Losses of the Armed Forces of Ukraine amounted to up to 195 servicemen, 3 armored combat vehicles, 14 cars, and 7 field artillery guns. Destroyed were a combat vehicle of the Grad multiple rocket launcher system, 3 Israeli-made Rada radar stations, an electronic warfare station, 4 ammunition depots, and 8 supply depots. Units of the West Group of Forces improved their position along the front line. Damage was inflicted on personnel and equipment of 2 mechanized assault brigades of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, a territorial defense brigade, and a National Guard brigade in the areas of the settlements Monikanovka, Grashevka, Kurilovka, Bogoslavka in the Kharkiv region, Yerovaya, Novoselovka, Drobashevo, Masliakovka, and Yampol in the Donetsk People's Republic. In the area of the settlement Kupyansk in the Kharkiv region, assault detachments of the 6th Army continue to destroy the encircled enemy grouping. 2 attacks were repelled by units of the 1st National Guard Brigade from the area of the settlement Osinovo in the Kharkiv region aimed at relieving the encircled formations of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. In the area of the settlement Petrovka in the Kharkiv region, an attempt by an enemy assault group to break through to the destroyed crossing over the Oskol River for its restoration was thwarted. Within a day, up to 55 servicemen, 18 units of weapons and military equipment were destroyed in the area of the settlement Kupyansk in the Kharkiv region, including 2 armored combat vehicles, 2 155mm self-propelled artillery systems Paladin of U.S. manufacture, 7 pickups, and 4 electronic warfare stations. Overall, in the area of responsibility of the West Group of Forces, losses of Ukrainian armed formations amounted to over 220 servicemen, 4 armored combat vehicles including 2 HMMWV armored vehicles of U.S. manufacture, 23 cars, as well as 2 self-propelled artillery systems and a combat vehicle of the Grad multiple rocket launcher system. 10 electronic warfare stations and 3 ammunition depots were destroyed. Units of the South Group of Forces occupied more advantageous lines and positions. Damage was inflicted on formations of 3 mechanized brigades of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, a Marine brigade, and a territorial defense brigade in the areas of the settlements Seversky, Zvanovka, Konstantinovka, Ivanopoli, Dranovka, Drushkovka, and Vasyevkovka in the Donetsk People's Republic. The enemy lost up to 80 servicemen, 2 tanks, 3 armored combat vehicles, 14 cars, and a field artillery gun. Destroyed were an electronic warfare station, 2 ammunition depots, and a supply depot. Units of the Center Troop Group have improved their tactical position. Defeated personnel and equipment of 2 mechanized, Ranger, Assault, 2 airborne assault brigades of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, a Marine brigade, and 2 National Guard brigades in the areas of the settlements Ivanovka, Lozovo and Dnipropetrovsk region, Dobropoli, Rodinsko, Belitsko, and Novy Don base of the Donetsk People's Republic. In the settlement of Krasnoarmeysk of the Donetsk People's Republic, assault groups of the Second Army continue the destruction of encircled formations of the armed forces of Ukraine in the eastern part of the Central District and in the Western Industrial Zone, as well as clearing Ukrainian militants from the settlements of Natovka and Rog of the Donetsk People's Republic. 39 buildings were liberated in 24 hours. 14 enemy attacks were repelled from the area of the settlement Grishino of the Donetsk People's Republic aimed at breaking the encirclement of the surrounded armed forces of Ukraine formations. As a result of fire strikes with precise hits by FPV drones and artillery fire, a Ukrainian tank and an armored personnel carrier along with personnel of the 155th Mechanized Brigade of the Armed Forces of Ukraine were destroyed. An attempt by militants of the 32nd Mechanized Brigade of the Armed Forces of Ukraine to break out of the encirclement ring northwards was thwarted. In the settlement of Dimitrov of the Donetsk People's Republic, units of the 5th Motorized Rifle Brigade of the 51st Army continue active offensive actions in the Vostochny micro-district. 19 buildings were liberated from Ukrainian militants. During the day, more than 240 Ukrainian servicemen, a tank, 2 combat armored vehicles including a Swedish-made PBV-302 armored personnel carrier, and 3 pickups were destroyed in the areas of Krasnoarmeysk and Dimitrov of the Donetsk People's Republic. Units of the East Troop Group advanced deep into the enemy's defense and completed the liberation of the settlement Volchi in the Dnipropetrovsk region. Damage inflicted on formations of a mechanized brigade and assault regiment of the Armed Forces of Ukraine in the areas of the settlements Yablikovo, Ravnopoli, Ternivado and Zaporizhia region, Velikomikhailovka and Otradno in Dnipropetrovsk region. The Armed Forces of Ukraine lost more than 285 servicemen, 3 combat armored vehicles, and 14 vehicles. Units of the Dnieper Troop Group inflicted damage on personnel and equipment of mechanized mountain assault brigades and a coastal defense brigade of the Armed Forces of Ukraine in the areas of the settlements Preobrazhenka, Stepnogorsk in Zaporizhia region, Burgunka and Tyadjinka in Kherson region. Up to 70 servicemen, 12 vehicles, 7 electronic warfare stations, and 5 ammunition depots were destroyed. Operational tactical aviation, strike unmanned aerial vehicles, missile troops, and artillery of the Russian Armed Forces troop groups inflicted damage on transport infrastructure facilities used in the interests of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, as well as on temporary deployment points of Ukrainian armed formations and foreign mercenaries in 147 areas. 2 guided aerial bombs and 178 airplane-type unmanned aerial vehicles were shot down by air defense means. In total, since the beginning of the special military operation, destroyed 668 aircraft, 283 helicopters, 95,554 unmanned aerial vehicles, 635 anti-aircraft missile systems, 25,907 tanks and other combat armored vehicles, 1,611 multiple launch rocket systems, 31,166 field artillery guns and mortars, 46,163 units of special military automotive equipment. Thank you so much for watching this video. We hope you found it useful and informative. If you have any questions, please leave them below and we'll get back to you as soon as possible.